You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth.
Hey, it's Brian Burns. Welcome to this episode of the Brutal Truth About Sales and Selling podcast. I've got some great topics today. We're going to be talking about the smarter way of selling with your brain. This is the untapped topic that very few people talk about in the B2B sale. And what we forget is it's not just hard work. Yes, you have to work hard. You have to show up every day. You have to do the work. You have to get out of your comfort zone. But you have to do it in a smart way. You have to use that brain, that little noodle up from the head there, and really apply both the science and the art of selling. And on the B2B show, I interviewed somebody who had these three traits that he looks for in A players about competitiveness, optimism, and the need for achievement. Today, I've got Deb Calvert back on the show. We're going to be talking about the feedback that she's gotten from her book on sales and sales leadership, not from a management standpoint, but from the rep standpoint. The rep leading the client through the process. Now, this dovetails really well into the research that Nudge.ai has done on how people are making buying decisions. And it connects up with my course of starting the conversation and getting the meeting. And everyone's been asking, hey, do you have any people who've gone through the course and getting results? Yes. If you go back to April, so 4/21, the interview with Ron Massey, check out that episode. It was one of the most popular I shouldn't quote numbers here, but it was huge, because he's just crushing it now. He worked his way up, and now he's getting meetings with VPs, all without no pitching, no spamming, none of that old school hustle and grind BS that just doesn't work anymore in the B2B sale. He will share his story and the success that he's had literally after, I think, 2 or 3 weeks of taking the course, sending me his emails. I've been correcting them, giving him feedback, giving them suggestions, and the results he's getting are phenomenal. Let's get into it with Deb Calvert. She's been on the show a couple times before. She's really bright, very in tune with how you handle the complex sale and what really works. And at the end, I'll sum it up for you and give you an update on the courses and where I'm going with the podcast and the rest of 2018. Here we go with Deb. Hey, Deb, welcome back to the show. Give us a little update on the book launch and how things are going.
Oh, well, first of all, Brian, thanks for having me back. I love your audience and your show. The book, Stop Selling and Start Leading, really is taken off like wildfire. I was calling this a movement even before we wrote the book because I just felt like it might be, and it is. People really like it. They are adopting it. They're writing me all kinds of great emails and telling me how much it's working for them and how much better they feel about selling because of what this book opens up for them. So I couldn't be happier.
And what kind of resonates with you as far as a contrast of how they viewed it before?
Several things. First of all, that it's got research with buyers and stories from sellers. Yeah. And the stories from sellers, people can see themselves in those stories. They can recognize their own behaviors, and now they know which ones of those behaviors to amp up because they see where those leadership behaviors can take them. So that's one thing that's really getting a lot of attention. There's something else that sort of surprised me. We included it because I knew it was out there. As a field coach, I see it. But I think we've liberated some open discussion about the notion of feeling pushy in selling.
Yeah.
And what that does to a seller. So lots of conversation about that.
And there seems to be, different schools of thought. There's kind of like the old school of just, hustle and grind. And I think that gets misinterpreted sometimes. I think we all know we have to work hard. That's kind of like the catch-all phrase of advice. You can never go wrong by saying it. But I don't think there's many salespeople out there that don't work hard. But I think that when you put the word leadership on something, I think you turn the onus on to the salesperson as far as what to do and how to do it.
I agree. Working hard is worthless if you're not working on the right things.
Isn't it?
Yes.
It doesn't matter how far you're running if you're going the wrong way, right?
Exactly. And I do think a lot of salespeople feel that way. They have all kinds of enablement tools and loads of prospects, and lots of different directions they could take, but the focus and the know-how of what to do with any of it can be overwhelming. So they work really, really hard and don't feel effective. I think there's a better way. Maybe instead of hustling, we ought to think about what does it take to be productive, not just the hard work, but the critical thinking that helps us figure out what to do when we're working hard.
And I think that part is missing, because I think with the advent of these leaderboards, KPIs, everything's on quantity and nothing's on quality, except for at the end of the month, quarter, and then all of a sudden everyone's in shock.
Right.
And, what you end up happening is that they put into the CRM whatever the manager wants to see, and then there's a big surprise at the end of the quarter that the thing didn't happen, and the manager was going under the assumption that was what's in the CRM is what's really going on.
Yeah, and then the message back is you're not working hard enough, you're not making enough calls, you're not, call them again.
Right,
Well,
exactly.
More of the same isn't going to change anything.
That's what you hear is trying a different channel, as opposed to have you connected with them yet? Do they know you? Do they like you? Do they trust you? Do they understand the pain yet? Are they aware that there's a problem? Is there a timeline associated with it? And I also think that people are misguided to think that the buyer's journey is some organized, well thought out path, which is
right. Yes.
And I don't know how many companies you've worked at, but every company I worked at, no one ever taught me how to buy anything.
It's true.
Right?
Yeah. Yep. All you know as a buyer is that you better get it right, and there's too many salespeople calling on you. So those two things are at odds with each other, and it can be very confusing, even for professional buyers.
And that's it, because most of us on this show are dealing in the complex sale, where it's more than one person, more than one sales call, high dollar amount, many different decision makers about different pieces of the decision are involved. And that leadership skill is critical, because you can't have somebody on the customer side not knowing what to do and you not knowing what to do. Someone's got to know what to do.
And that's exactly why buyers want us to step into the role of leader. The research we did with buyers is so compelling. And what I think people misunderstand is leader doesn't mean manager. Right. Buyers don't want you to come in and try to manage their business. Yeah. But the word leader, at its core, the root of that word, is laden, which means to guide. And buyers badly want us. They need us to come in and guide them to a place they've never been before. We have to chop the vines and branches out of the way to get them from point A to point B. And when we do, it's an entirely different way of working. It's not just working harder. It's not just hustle. It's strategic, well thought out, deliberate guiding of a buyer to that great new place.
And that's it. And I think what's happened is the people who teach the simple sale, the one call close, where you're selling magazine subscriptions or cable TV or whatever it is, that those same approaches hurt you in the complex sale, I think, because you're not going to get a credit card number at the end of the meeting.
No, you're going to damage your brand, though, by doing business that way.
Yeah. You want the next meeting. You want to guide them through, validating that the product does what you need, that it's better than the alternatives, that it gives a business outcome, that you need economic approval for it. And this person has to understand that there's a purchase request that must be filled out and your business justification attached to it to show that you did your due diligence. So when the manager looks at it, it's not some harebrained idea, but it's a well thought out change in the way they do business. Yes,
exactly. And again, you're talking about leadership. Leadership is you bring the change, you co-create it, you build it out, you then are able to breathe life into it and to mobilize the forces around it that will make it happen. And as sellers, we don't always do those things. We pitch, and then we don't know why the pitch isn't taking hold. It's because we're not leading the buyer through it and beyond it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like, in life there's downward spirals, and sometimes there's upward spirals. And I think in sales leadership we get upward spirals where we hire a sales leader out of somebody in the tornado, where they're just taking orders, and they've built up a sales operations system to be able to process those orders more effectively and efficiently. And then they go to a small company that doesn't have the tornado, and they're wondering why it's not working.
Yeah, I think you're onto something here, because I read the various discussion threads on LinkedIn or hear various trainers and coaches talking. And the truth is, sales is different depending on the product that you're selling and the type of sales cycle that you're working with. So a complex sale is and should be entered into very differently than the transactional sale that you described. And that might even be needing some variances and nuances from one type of product to another in different types of industries. For example, in ag and in a lot of manufacturing, the way that the salespeople interact, or in media, the way salespeople interact with their customers is very, very different from a SaaS solution or something in tech. So you've got to know in your industry. And what that means is that your selling skills are transportable if you have learning agility and can adapt them to your environment and your customers.
And kind of own that, because you may not get taught that. Your manager may not even be aware of it, may not have even have sold your product. They may have come in at the management level without any firsthand experience, and they typically will focus on the deals that are already in the pipeline, already moved to procurement, and are pull deals as opposed to, cold outreach deals.
Right. So critical thinking is more important than ever in selling. You have to be able to analyze. Where am I? What am I doing? What's going to work? If that doesn't work, not more of the same, but let me try something different, and find what works. Find what works for you in your environment, and don't get bogged down in the hustle, right? The grind. If it's not working.
Try to find the other needle in the haystack, right?
Right. There's always a way, but only if you go looking for it.
And understanding that in the complex sale, the timing is critical, and keeping that rapport and keeping that engagement with the person and having a reason to be conversing and working together and planning that out. And,
yep.
And reps aren't used to that, do you think?
I absolutely think so. What I see is, you said keeping it. I'm going to step back and say starting it. So if I see so many reps, if I don't see a green light and the purchase is coming in the next quarter, maybe I'm not so interested. But this is for the long game. And you've got to go ahead and don't just qualify that customer out entirely. Build the relationship. Of course, now you have to go somewhere else for what you need to do this quarter. But you're going to be in the same boat in Q4 if you don't start now with the people who are building up toward their purchase cycle in Q4. So you have to make it short and long term.
Yeah, because I get the question a lot about how to prioritize deals. And I'm kind of confused sometimes that people have a hard time. I typically do it, and I almost insist on doing it chronologically. And they go, well, why would you do it based off of the deal size? And I'm like, well, you have to eat this month, and you focus on the things that are going to happen. And typically the bigger deals need nurturing and don't need daily activity. But if you have a this month deal, you should be, in touch, every couple times a week on, moving it forward, preventing the obstacles that typically come up in legal and procurement, or getting the budget allocated for it, and the purchase request signed by the appropriate people, and not just stick with that one end user that loves you and talks to you.
Absolutely. I mean, this is why we need to always be really aware of what's in our funnel and where it is. Ideally, you want that funnel to have clients and prospects all the way through it. So client has something new coming up and they're in the funnel, you're moving them through. Prospect is this close to signing the deal. Of course, you're going to spend time there, just like you're going to spend time at the top of the funnel with the folks who aren't going to make a decision for a year. But if you're not paying attention to the most likelies in each part of your funnel, you'll hit that point where you're sunk. You don't have what you need.
And we're kind of trained to kind of focus only on either what's in procurement right now or the big deal, the big deal that's alive and inbound, and not really doing that outbound, building the pipeline, because you got to ask yourself, what do you have control over? Here we are almost halfway through the year, and if you're on calendar year, your comp plan, you got to say, like, what can close by the end of December, right? And if you take a step back and you look at your deals, and it's like, if it's not going to close by the end of December, it's pretty low on the list. Now, what do I have that's inbound, that's active, that there's already interest and you're engaged and they're doing stuff with you? They've shown evidence and responsiveness, and you can lead them through that process. And then there's the ones that should be, that just haven't recognized that pain yet, and they're nimble enough to get through the process by the end of the year. And how do you make sense of all that? That prioritization, is critical if you really want to, blow away your number.
I agree. But I think that elsewhere in our lives, we don't always think this way. So it's not a habit that we've formed, right? Think about your savings. How many people at age 30 really have a retirement plan and money that they're putting away, and they're paying attention to those investments and adjusting them quarter to quarter to make sure that they are going to yield what they need in retirement? No, when you're 30, you're thinking about this weekend, what am I going to spend my money on? And, saving a little bit for a car or house. But when it's that far out in the distance, we have to be thinking about it. Otherwise, it is always going to be a grind. And boy, it doesn't have to be. When you're selling for the long term and the short term, you set yourself up to be so much more stable.
Yeah. And we're conditioned to just really think about our next meal, really,
Yes.
our next nap, our next, party or whatever. And that's the way we are. And we try and deny that by saying, oh, well, I'm college educated and everything. But you're like, we're still, impulse oriented. I put a question out on LinkedIn that go, how many people pick up the phone if they don't recognize the number? And there was an enormous number of people who said they do. And I kind of asked why, right? And it's like, oh, I'm in sales. I go, how many of your customers have your cell number? And why wouldn't they be in your ID? Why wouldn't they be in your caller ID? It's like there's this stimulus response thing that still does work. And that's why cold calling still works.
Yes.
Is that some people still pick up the phone.
Right.
And I did a little skit on door-to-door sales that I found on YouTube. And people were like, you're making fun of door-to-door salespeople. I go, no, it's just a joke. It's just a joke. Relax. If that's how you make your living, God bless. I don't care how anyone makes their living, but some people still open the door to strangers.
Mm-hmm. And just like some of us, as soon as a text beeps on our phone, we look at it immediately, no matter what else we're doing.
Yep.
And some people have a really hard time breaking up with the ping that tells you every time a new email comes in, because you have a choice. You don't have to have that happen. But we like the stimulus, and even though it's a distraction and it makes us less effective than we could be, we always want to be so reactive to those things.
Yeah, that's it. And Facebook has made a game out of that, right? They're trying to make it addictive. All of them are trying to make their applications addictive. And it's keeping us away from doing the real stuff. And I think that's what happened when, CRMs actually became usable. or maybe usable. That we ended up having to.
Some are getting better. Yeah.
That became the central point of sales, as opposed to the customer being the central point of sales. I remember it was like managers used to walk around the office going, "Hey, there's no customers in here. Get out of here." Right? And today it's like, if it's not in the CRM, it doesn't exist. And it's like, well, that's not exactly true.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, we need balance. Balance between the long term and the short term, balance between the customer facing and the administrative stuff, balance between be serious, real with yourself. What's really working and what's not.
Yeah. And how about as far as feedback from managers? Has there been any counterintuitive things that came out of it?
Yes. So, for example, in the book, we say it's not about persistence, it's about perseverance. And I've had a couple of interesting responses to that, mainly because people don't understand the difference. And so saying it's not persistence is a hot button.
You got to remember who you're dealing with.
Yep. Well, first of all, let me clarify, so in case there is any confusion. Persistence is just doing something over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Great. But if it's not working, don't. What buyers responded to, so actually, let me step back here. Okay, so buyer research with B2B buyers, and then we collected stories from sellers. All we asked sellers was, tell us the story of your personal best in selling. Right? We didn't give them any of the behaviors or context. We just wanted the stories. And then we put them side by side to see if the behaviors buyers want actually showed up in those stories where sellers said they were most successful. And they did. But here's what's really interesting. Sellers didn't make a link. They didn't say, because I did these things, I made this sale. They mostly said, I made the sale because I was so persistent. And over on the buyer side, out of all those buyers and all their comments, the word persistence did not show up a single time.
Yep.
They didn't attribute their purchases at all to seller persistence. What they admired that sellers were doing is that when they showed up, no matter how many times that was, when they showed up, they behaved in certain ways. So persisting, which to me includes things like calling again and again to say, hey, just checking in, Brian, anything new? Yeah, low value.
No value.
Persevering is a dogged determination to make things happen. And that comes with the appropriate behaviors and with taking on the challenge and sticking with it, putting something more into it. And value comes from that kind of investment from the seller.
Right. And I think if we dig into that, because that goes back to your point about critical thinking, you have to know what those things are.
Yep.
Because they don't. I think we go into the assumption that they do. And, and there was a study that came out about car test drives, that they were of little of no value, but there was a small percentage of car salespeople who spent like an hour and a half on the test drive with the person. Meaning, like, let's take it out on the highway. Let's take it out over here. Where do you typically drive? They got to understand and really bond with the product. And I remember, because I sold very expensive software and or hardware, and we would go on site almost every day of the 30-day evaluation. And I would sit down I would, comb the organization, go office to office and find out the impact that we would have. I would talk to all the engineers and say, like, how's this going to impact you? What should we be showing you? Are you looking at this? And next to our product was the 4 other products they were looking at that were abandoned with nobody there. And guess how you won?
Well, sure.
Right? You were like, and you could say, well, took up a lot of time. It's not like I had anything better to do with that week, right? If I can get a deal that week on a big price item, and I didn't have many of them, I could sit at the office and cold call and try and find the next one. But they're going to make a decision, And, let's face it, all 5 products probably could have done almost everything that they wanted immediately, maybe not in 2 or 3 years. But when you walk them through it, because how many times do we get like I just got a new cable modem and it was a nightmare to install. And it was like, first of all, it was 4 times the size of my old modem. And they tell me, oh, we're sending you a new modem because it's going to support faster internet. So I test the speed before I install it. Now it's 1/4 the speed of the old modem.
Oh.
And then, so I try and downgrade it and just unplug it and plug it back into the old modem. And it's not like a electric plug. It got configured to the new modem, so now it won't work with the old modem. And I'm like, what a customer experience this is. But that is what customers are going through. And
it is.
I didn't call anyone. I'm like, whatever,
But you're wide open. If there were some competitor who could now come in and say, I can fix that for you, I understand, right? You wouldn't hesitate.
Well, and that is why I don't switch, right? Mm-hmm. Because there is a competitor that came up and dug up my backyard to put in their cables. But guess what? I work on the internet, every waking hour of my day, and my business is dependent on it. And I have a friend who says, I'm switching. I go, well, you live in a 100-year-old house, and that, what do you think that's going to take a day to switch over? Do you think anything can go wrong? Yeah. And you're like, and of course, what the vendor says is, don't turn them off until we're working, right?
What a mess. Yeah. Technology is tricky. And everything you're describing is exactly what buyers are feeling too. That apprehensiveness and the fear of the unknown. We have to empathize and we have to be able to guide them even through those kinds of feelings.
Right. Yeah. And what would it take? Just hypothetically, if literally the vendor would have to show up, hook it up, get it working before they leave, and show me that it's faster, and without any interruption to my life. And I know they're less expensive. I know theoretically they're faster. And you would think I'm crazy not for switching, but there is that comfort with the status quo, and that's why I'm not.
Right.
And I think that's how a lot of people feel.
I know it is. And by the way, every single buyer also has 50 other things that they need to do that aren't as risky or are more pressing. So that's low priority.
It is. Right. Where is it on my list to save $10 or $15 on my internet bill? Right. It's like, it's not that high. Mm-hmm. And if you look at a company, them buying a new product, and all of a sudden, if you're not helping them connect it up with whatever else it has to work with and showing them how it works, flawlessly, not just, send them a link to a video or answer their questions, but actually walk them through that. I mean, and that's guiding them, what you call leadership, through that whole process.
It is. And guiding them not only through the process, but the decision before they ever got there. And then to continue guiding them to make sure that they know they're not alone after the deal is done, a contract is signed, and the implementation is completed. No, you're still there. And because you want to be able to get the referral, you want to be able to get the upgrade later on or to bring a new product. And so you maintain that relationship. It doesn't have to be time consuming, but it has to be deliberate. You have to want to continue to be involved with people.
Yeah. Excellent. Hey, this has been another great conversation. Where do people go to learn more about your work, your book, and how do they connect with you?
Yeah, so the book, Stop Selling and Start Leading, it's available at all the major book sellers, and it's now available on audiobook as well. For me, Deb Calvert, you can come to my website, People First, PS. That is standing for the business name, People First Productivity Solutions. And over there, we've got all kinds of resources for salespeople and sales managers. Or just email me. You'll see my email on the website. I'd love to talk to anybody from your show, Brian. I think this is a quality audience.
Hey, so here's the takeaways that I got from it. We have to lead our clients through this buying process. We cannot just sit back and just ask questions and send them what they ask for and ask them what they want to do next. We have to know what they need to do next. We have to guide them through this journey. And this is what I teach in my courses. This is what I learned through 25 years of selling and the complex sale, is if you just wait for them to go through the journey, you are not going to get the deal. Somebody else is, but somebody else is going to take over that deal and lead them through the process. You have to take their hand and guide them through and understand that it's not just one person. That's the biggest mistake people make in the complex sale. They think it's one person, and what ends up happening is that somebody end runs you and gets the deal. So you got to have this cognitive thinking of analyzing what is the best use of your time? What are the biggest priorities? How are you going to win this deal? And then you should take a step back and ask yourself, are you competitive enough? Are you optimistic enough? Do you want to achieve enough? And if you aren't, can you change that? Research says if you're over 24, it says you can't. I think you can. I honestly do. I think you can change any characteristic of your personality that you want to. But you have to want to do it. It can't be an external thing. It can't be just more money or more this and more that, more awards. It's got to be internal. So what you need to do is, I've got tons of podcasts back there. Remember the April 421 Ron Massey interview. Now, there you take somebody who was struggling, somebody who couldn't get meetings, spent 2 years trying to get a meeting with this VP. In 1 week, I showed him how to do it, and he got it, and you can just hear the energy in his voice. When you learn how to sell, when you learn and understand other people and how to help them, how to give, instead of just all about you. And I get that all this hatred on YouTube and on LinkedIn. It's like, oh, okay, I got to get their attention, and then I got to build interest, and then I've got to do, oh my God, what year is this? The idea of being able to interrupt somebody, getting their attention, and then getting their interest, and then have them take action. How often does that work, right? First of all, are you even talking to the right person? Or you're talking to the person who has access to the right person. Well, I show you how to get around all that. That is so 1960s. And I'm telling you, that when I see these sales trainers out there still teaching 20-year-old stuff, and they literally only sold for 5 years to begin with, right? And the thing is, 5 years, that's really the SDR level of selling. If you haven't gone face-to-face through a multi-seven-figure deal, and if you're not making $500K a year, that's where I want you to be, if you want to be there. Right? If you're in B2B sales and you're making less than $500K a year, right, easily, and headhunters aren't calling you and the phone's not ringing off the desk, then you need to take the course. And you're saying, well, Brian, you just want the money. And it's like, no, I don't. Because I don't want any whiny bitches in the course. I want people who are aggressive, who want to sell, learn how to sell, not the cheesy used car salesman. Is it MasterCard or Visa? No, that's not the sale I'm talking about. I'm talking about enterprise selling, B2B selling, where you have a future where you can make more than a brain surgeon. That's the market that I'm talking about. Now, if you're serious about that, check out b2brevenue.com. Under training, you can see all the courses there, as well as schedule a time with me if you're serious. Don't schedule a time. Oh, I had a question about the course. No. Is it a match for you? Okay. Do not waste my time. I'm adamant about that. Anyone who wastes my time will be blocked from the course. I want people who are serious about it, because this is a serious business. And if you're sitting around waiting for the right company or the right job, or wait till I get older, or maybe when I get out of school, or whining around, waiting for other people to throw money at you, you don't have the ambition. And that's okay. There's plenty of room for B players. There's no room for C players anymore, though. So you got to be careful. And I don't mean to be harsh with you. I just mean to be brutally honest with you. That in the world of sales, you're either going to be in the top 2 to 5%, or you're going to suffer making half of what they do and getting a job every 2 years. So it's up to you. And I've seen it over and over again. And the problem with sales is you don't get an equal job. You tend to get a worse and worse job until you're working part-time somewhere. And I don't want to see that happen to you, because that's the harsh part about this profession, is that it's becoming more and more like, sports and stuff. There's still plenty of room. I mean, that 1 to 5% is still, probably close to 1 million people, right, worldwide. But if you're not pushing for it, because other people are hungry. And if you don't want to do it, someone else does. So let's get serious about this. The summer's coming up. Here we are at the first week of June. Man, Q2 is almost over. I know your head's down, but July and August, let's get signed up for that course and let's get serious about it so that you can hit September and crush the rest of the year. When it costs money, I know, Brian, you charge money. Well, there's 9 years of podcasts here, too, that I've been doing for free. If you don't think it's worth it, then you got to really take a close look at yourself in the mirror and look at your W-2. Are you making $500K? I hear, these podcasts about, the number one sales rep making $200. I go, loser. Sorry, buddy, that's not crushing it. It's like you are being sold up the river by your manager. If you're that good, get the hell out of there and go to a company that pays real money. Unlimited cap. I'm telling you, it's out there. And everybody asks me, well, where should I go? Go sell software. I mean, software has been very, very, very good to me. And it'll be very, very good to you, too, if you sell it. And I can show you how. Instead of trying to sell some old school thing or stick around in retail or, selling to mom and pops. No, you got to sell to real businesses that have money. Go to where the money is. Why did John Dillinger rob the banks? Because that's where the money is. Sorry if I've been too pushy here. I just want to wake you up. It's the end of Q2. I know you're driving around. You're like, I got to make my number, Brian. Well, that's how you do it. We'll see you in the class. Thanks for listening. Hey, if you want the book, I'll give it to you for free. All you have to do is get on LinkedIn, take a picture of the artwork on the podcast, just a screenshot, share it, tag me and 2 other salespeople, and I'll send you the book. Make sure we're a level 1 connection so I can send you an email. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.